Welcome to Talking Knocks, presented by the Pewter Cast. This is a Hard Knocks call-in after show where you guys are going to be able to call in, talk to us about the most recent episode of Hard Knocks, which just got done airing on HBO. It's just a few minutes after 11, so we've watched that East Coast airing, episode 4 of Hard Knocks, featuring our beloved Buccaneers. I am Brent Allen, your host. With me, as always, my co-host, Ren. Ren, how you doing tonight, my friend?
Doing well. Everything's great. Like you said, we just finished watching the last episode of Hard Knocks. Another good, pretty informative show. Mm-hmm. A little nail-biting for some of the rooks, huh?
Yeah, no joke. I got to tell you, I'm going to go ahead and just spoil this. I don't know if it's spoiler or whatever. To me, this episode is 100% the closest of what I had in my mind that Hard Knocks would be out of any of the episodes to this point. I really felt like the heart of training camp in this episode, more so than I have any of the other ones. This episode felt more focused on an editing level and with the storylines that they were able to bring us. So I really liked this episode. How about you? Kind of an overall thought for the show.
Yeah, this was definitely the most down and dirtiest. It started off very lighthearted, sort of like the other shows had been. A lot about family and how close they were, and lots of off the field things. But this was a show definitely where they showed, I guess, the darker side of training camp, as in some guys just don't get it, and right. Some guys just need to get to the playbook, and some guys, no matter you can have all the intangibles in the world, but you just don't have the athletic ability to stick on an NFL roster.
Right. And we're certainly going to be talking about some of those a little bit more in detail as the night goes on. But Ren, one thing I was also noting in watching this show is having gone through the training camp journal that we put out, Training Camp Journal with Ren Daxt, getting to listen to those episodes, even not necessarily being at every single training camp, a lot of these storylines we knew. There's what you kind of get from the media and kind of the surface level stuff that we as fans hear about. You gave us a whole nother viewpoint of a lot of the things that we saw inside of Hard Knocks inside the episode this week. And it was real interesting to kind of put all of that together and then take yet a whole nother angle that we actually got to see that the Hard Knocks cameras got to film, and put some pieces to that. Just for example, places where you were saying, hey, so-and-so looks good, or there's this little event that happened, or even the whole thing with Gerald bringing that little girl out of the stands and dancing. Like, we all saw that. We saw that kind of come out on Twitter. What we didn't see necessarily was that it was Coach Cutter sitting there next to him saying, hey, see that little girl, go get her. And McCoy went, got it, Coach. And he runs over and does it, So I'm loving the complimentary aspect of how everything's kind of fitting together for us as Bucs fans that are following them as closely as we are.
Yeah, it's when you start to, really dive in deep and follow the Buccaneers, you start to realize that everything's not what it appears to be on the surface. And this episode of Hard Knocks was it did a lot of that, especially if you're listening, like you said, to Ren's journals. The Dirk Cutter thing, yeah, that was the first thing I picked up on, was because Gerald McCoy, I don't want to say got all the praise, but everyone just thought, it was Gerald McCoy who grabbed the girl. What I found interesting was that Gerald knew that Coach was up to something. Mm-hmm. He was like, he's like, you got that look in your eye. What's up? And then Dirk's like, well, there's that girl in the stands. Go grab her. But you don't know if Gerald never would have said anything to him, like, hey, you got that look in your eye. What's going on? If that moment never would have happened. Also, I had talked near the end of the episodes about how Bobo Wilson and Walker, Darnell Walker, aren't getting, it seemed like, a fair shake. And I said, well, granted, I'm not in the meeting rooms. I don't hear all these other conversations. But from what I see, he seems to be doing fine. But then you see in this episode where, they're continuing to ask him to hustle, and he just doesn't. He just sort of blows it off, and then starts talking crap as soon as they walk away. Yeah. and then the meeting. And now it could be it could be creative editing. Like he might have got 20 of those plays in a row. Like, what coverage is this? He could have got like 20 in a row. That might have been just the one he missed. It's the only one they showed. But it's like it's three. Like he's like cover 3 or something, and then he's like, well, you got to watch the play. And then, but he always had something to say, like how it's not his fault, and that kind of thing. Well, with Florida State, we compete. I don't know what they're doing here, and it's like, all right, obviously you don't get it. It's the things that you find important aren't the things the coaching staff finds important, and vice versa. There's a disconnect from what he's seeing and what he thinks he needs to do to make the team and what the coaches need to do to make the team.
Yeah, I thought it was real interesting, and I believe it was Bobo Wilson. It might have been Jeremy McNichols. It was one of those two, but I'm pretty sure it was Todd Monken it was the coach. They came over after messing up a play in practice, and he said, don't defend. Just where were you supposed to be? What was supposed to happen? Don't defend. There's that's honestly a leadership principle of just don't defend. Like, just talk to us about what happened. I don't care why it didn't. Let's make sure that you know where you're going. Like, don't get so defensive. You can't. It's hard to use somebody who is always defensive all the time. Well, before we get too much further, I want to give a shout out to everybody who is joining us live in the Mixlr chat room. It's mixlr.com/thepewtercast. Several people are over there right now, so saying hi to everybody over there. You guys have fun in the chat room. We'll be checking in with you guys throughout the night. And I do want to go ahead and open up the phone line for tonight. The number is 864-729-BUCKS. That's 864-729-2827. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on the episode tonight. We'll talk about anything you want. We'll be here for about the next hour or so, or until you guys stop calling. Lots and lots to talk about. Just a quick reminder, this is a PG-13 show. We like to, allow people to listen to it in the car with their kids. But we hold those we hold those rules pretty loose, don't we, Ren?
Yes, we do.
Very much so. So including the host, absolutely. So you guys give us a call. We'd love to know where you're calling from. We'd love to know what your thoughts were on the show tonight. What stood out to you? What jumped out to you? What do you got on your mind? So, Bobo Wilson, let's go back to talking about him for just a minute, Ren. Kind of one of the notes I made towards the end. Watching him get into full on fisticuff fight with Josh Huff at some point. I don't
think that was him. That was McNichols.
No, it was. Well, I saw it was Huff. I stopped it and I actually rewound it to see who it was, and it sure looked like Huff to me. But I'm pretty sure, 99% sure. But I could have seen it on the second one because I was trying to catch back up with everybody else so we could get in for this show. But my point being, this episode really made me not like Bobo Wilson. I think hate would be too strong of a word, but definitely. This did not put him in a good light at all.
No, I think this is, me thinking about as what HBO is trying to do. They're trying to set up people that they think are not going to make the team. Mm-hmm. And so it was sort of like an introduction to these people. Like Cameron Lynch had, a 5-second cameo, because he was interning at that radio station. That was the only thing you saw about Cameron Lynch. I think he's going to make the team because he's been playing special teams. But, Bobo Wilson, he's on his way out. I think we talked about that on, episode 43. Was it? We just recorded last night?
Yeah, the one from last night,
Yeah, about Riley Bulla. And he was the guy I was talking about, has all the intangibles and everything you want, but he just doesn't have basically the athletic ability. It's the movement. And you keep hearing that every time, someone would bring it up to Dirk Cutter in the press conference and be like, it's just a numbers game,
Right.
I think they'd like to keep him, but they can't. There's not a space for him. And the biggest sort of clue for that is that Riley doesn't play any special teams. Mm-hmm. At least I haven't seen him out there for any of the special teams, any of the coverages or the kicks. So if you're not going to start, you have to play special teams. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of a good thing for Jeremy McNichols. I think now that I've seen the show, I think Dirk Cutter sort of brought McNichol's name up on purpose during that press conference, knowing that that this was coming out, basically sort of like a preemptive strike, so it wouldn't catch Jeremy so blindsided. Maybe, I don't know. That could, or maybe just letting the public know more instead of like he didn't want this huge story to be tomorrow about how Jeremy McNichols might not make the team. But yeah, back to Bobo Wilson. Yeah, he was the guy I was talking about who just doesn't get it. Like, there's definitely this disconnect between him and the coaches. He thinks he's the bee's knees, and everything he's doing is great. And the things they're asking him to do, he just doesn't seem to like even hear it. I mean, he even said that. He's like, I don't hear that. It's like, you need to hustle back. I don't hear that. So yeah.
And Jason Light talks about, he talked about a lot this offseason of we're not just looking for the right guy, we're looking for the right kind of guy. They are actively trying to build a culture around Tampa Bay. And that is not the kind of culture that we want here. People that are going to bring that. We need people that are going to listen to the coaches, people that aren't going to come in to I mean, I don't mind somebody coming in who's cocky and can back it up and has some swagger, like a Deshaun Jackson or something like that. But if nothing is ever your fault and you're just getting an unfair shake and whatever, but you're not hustling to the ball, you're not hustling in and out of the huddles, you're not in the playbook, you don't know where you're supposed to be, there's not much I can do with you on that,
Yeah, and then the polar opposite would be Chris Godwin. Even though he was a draft pick, but
right.
I sort of talked about it. We talked about it, in episode 43 a little bit, but I also, like you brought up again, I talked about it in Ren's diary. It's how he acts like a 5-year vet. He gets drafted, so he sets up a place to stay and has everything in order, and it's just like he takes the next logical step. Like, you're drafted. He's like, okay.
Right. Let me find a place to live. I thought it was hilarious watching that little exchange between Jason Light and I think it was Brian Baldringer, however you say his name, where they're talking about McNichols, and they had the conversation that I find myself having with people all the time, like getting a little bit older, of just going, oh, you mean he actually acted like an adult? This adult who's coming in here, he went in and got himself situated and got himself set, and brought him, did whatever he needed to do, and like, oh, well, look at him actually being mature about this whole situation. I found that really funny. Before we go any further, I did want to take a step back and talk about Bulla for just a second. Two things that I had on him. One, I really like the nickname Bully better than I do Joe Dirt. And I noticed they didn't say Joe Dirt at all in this episode, or at least I didn't notice it. But if I can throw my 2 cents in there, let's change the nickname over to Bully as opposed to Joe Dirt. He really didn't look good. But did you hear what Mike Smith said about him specifically towards the end of the game?
You're gonna have to remind me.
Yeah, Mike Smith was up in the box, the coach's box, and he literally said, "You can see why Riley is not gonna, and yeah, I mean, you can read into that, like, he's not going to make the team." It's like, oh crap, and there's a piece of me that wonders how much have they really known that Riley may or may not, probably isn't going to make the team, that from an editing standpoint on HardKnocks, that they go, hey, let's focus on this guy for a couple weeks to build that dramatic tension. As we get, I don't know that they did that. I'm wondering if they did from a production standpoint.
Well, it's impossible since, the first show aired, they didn't even have that tape of Mike Smith saying that until like 4 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, I just wonder if maybe, like, in their pre-production meeting, they sat down and said, okay, who's the guy who you can almost guarantee this is not going to make the team.
Who do you really like? Who do you wish was a better athlete could make the team?
But he's really not going to make the team, so we can pump him up and do something. That's kind of shenanigans you see in reality TV all the time. I don't know what those production meetings are like. I'm just saying I'm curious if that actually happened. That's all I'm saying. So
yeah, because he did sort of come out of nowhere. And I'm glad they've dropped the Joe Dirt thing, because the only people I'm not in the locker room, obviously, but the only people that called him Joe Dirt was HBO. They did it for like 3 episodes. Like Riley Bulla, also known as Joe Dirt, because that's what we called him the week before. It's like, I've never heard anybody call him Joe Dirt. It was just something they were perpetuating themselves. And I think they finally sort of got the hint that he doesn't like it at all.
Right.
And so they're backing off. Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll find out. Guys in the chat room are talking about Bulla right now, saying that was a pretty bad omen for Riley, specifically, I think, talking about what Mike Smith said there. Talking about whether or not he's going to make the practice squad with us or if he's going to be plucked over for another team. Tennessee Buck thinks that he's going to be picked up by another team before he makes it, clears waivers or whatever to make it back to our practice squad. What do you think? Is he a practice squad guy? You think he'll get plucked up for somebody else?
I would think they love to keep him on the practice squad and sort of maybe develop him. But that's the thing. That's what's so tricky about Riley. It's he's got the only thing holding me back is basically his athletic ability. So a developmental guy is someone who has the ability but hasn't sort of caught up. The game's still too fast for them. They don't know all the calls yet. They can't quite get the playbook down. Things like that. So they're developing their NFL talent. I don't know if Riley's going to get any better talent-wise. Like, he seems to know what he's doing. He seems to be making all the right calls. He comes from a football family. It's just that he's like they said in the meeting, it's like movement, and he sort of wanted to go on a little bit and then stopped, and he just went, yeah, he's like movement, and that's what it is. Just he's too slow. That's sort of the transition about it. But I agree that I think he's going to get picked up by a team. I don't know if he'll stick with them, but the leadership and always the communication that is necessary for that position, and someone who is just a rookie. I think teams with not such a deep linebacking core, such as the Bucs have or the Giants have, or teams like that, will definitely pick him up and bring him in. So I won't guarantee that he'll stick with that team all year, because they might just come to the conclusion like, yeah, you're right. He just he's just not fast enough. But
practice squads churn. Yeah, like the bottom of the roster, practice squads also, there's a lot of movement on those things all year long. We saw that happen last year. Last year was the first year I was watching the practice squad like a hawk. So I only assume that it happens, every year before that as well. But yeah, it does. So that'll churn, and you get dropped from one, you get brought back. You get dropped from one, you get brought back. You maybe even get activated for a game, so to speak, right? And then you got to go through the whole waivers thing again, and maybe you do or don't get picked back up on the practice squad after you get waived for that 1 week, that you got brought up for. But Ren, I think this goes to kind of that point that you were talking about, or you had kind of previewed a little bit for an article you've been working on of it being time for the league to get a minor league system in.
Right.
Because that would be perfect for a guy like Bulla. Maybe even a guy like Bobo Wilson or a Jeremy McNichols who, not quite ready for the big game, but, let's work with them a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's long overdue, especially, and here's the reasons why. The first one is that the superstars aren't even sticking around for their third contract now. They're getting their second contract and they're getting out of the league. I guess the most recent and the biggest name you could think of was Charles Johnson, the wide receiver from Detroit. He could have put up some more numbers that challenged for some all-time receiving, categories, but he chose that after his second contract was up, he's done. He's like, I have the money I need. I'm going to be, comfortable the rest of my life. it's starting to become a life choice of how you want how you want your body to be in the second half, I guess, of your life. So with people dipping out earlier and there's no development for these guys to practice, I just think that that the talent, I guess, in the NFL. Sorry, I wasn't really prepared for this question. The overall talent is sort of dipping in some of the skill positions, especially the non-high dollar positions. And then you have the whole narrative of parents not letting kids starting to start football or play football at all. I don't think there'll ever be a lack of bodies for the NFL football. I just think the overall talent will start to dip, and they need a league where you can sort of pluck people out during the season. So if you have a playoff team, like the Bucs would be a perfect example. If you have a playoff team, you can even lose last year. If the Bucs could have found like a Chris Godwin type, very solid, not flashy, but knows the NFL game and could plug him into the other side of Mike Evans, who knows how many, if they could have made the playoffs. The year before that, Dallas had, a playoff team. Tony Romo goes down and they win like 4 games. They go like 4-12 when these guys were supposed to, be Super Bowl contenders just because one person went down. Kurt Warner was an indoor football league, Marina Football League quarterback, and now he's in the Hall of Fame. He's used to not having a lot of time to throw, fitting the ball in very small windows, getting rid of it quickly, and that's sort of the way the NFL game, at least offensively, is developing into that. So all those lots of factors, people leaving early, and I don't think the 53-man roster is actually deep enough. That's sort of another factor, because when guys go down, having to pick people off the street. Because last year the Bucs would have players that were on the practice squad. Like they had running backs on the practice squad, but when Doug Martin went down, instead of promoting him, they went out and got, Jaquiz Rogers. And then later off the year, they went out and got Antone Smith, because these guys just weren't ready for the NFL game. And getting, running the scout teams in practice really isn't going to help.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, you think about that. Like, what happens if a Russell Hansbrough, or let's even just say a Dante Dye, a guy that we saw a lot from tonight, who's kind of been back and forth on those things. If they would have had a developmental league, so to speak, that they could go to. They're talking about in the chat room right now the difference with the CFL. If the CFL kind of serves that role and that purpose, and it really doesn't. There's a lot of first of all, the CFL has zero ties to the NFL. And I kind of commented in there. I said, that seems to me like where players that get washed out of the NFL go to ride out their careers or try to make a resurgence. Not so much necessarily where guys go to develop to move up to the NFL. Plus, I don't think an NFL team can promote a guy from the CFL. Like, you can't just pluck him mid-season and move him up if he's ready to go. But certainly having that developmental league would, give these guys more of a preparatory deal rather than, as you say, just running the scout team for the actual guys on the team.
Right. I mean, the CFL. At first, when you just hear the idea, you can be like, "Oh, but CFL." That automatically where your mind would go to. But honestly, the game's just a little bit too different for development for the NFL with only 3 downs. Like you would, there's zero development of run blocking. The field's like 10 yards wider, so the tackling's extremely poor up there. It's kind of like
it's a different game.
It's a different game. Yeah. It really is. It's just a different game. There's different rules. So the philosophy of the way they run offensive and defensive are just not like the way they are in the NFL. Honestly, the closest thing, and I know, and it sounds stupid, is the Arena League and the Indoor Football League. It's basically just glorified 7-on-7s on a smaller field. There's just a few rules you'd have to tweak here and there. and the NFL just needs to like just buy both leagues and combine them and use that as like their farm team.
So getting back to Hard Knocks, fun discussion on all of that. Want to throw it out to everybody listening in the chat room. The phone line is open, 864-729-BUCKS. That's 864-729-2827. Would love to take your phone call, your thoughts about the show tonight. So talking about Riley, let's move over. We've kind of covered some of the losers, I think, really from this week. Guys that came out of this episode not really looking as great. Before we actually move on, let's talk about McNichols a little bit more. Let's dive into what we saw from McNichols. You know, we in Bucks fandom have had this story of McNichols not really looking as good. Like we heard rumors of it, really seemed to explode after this last preseason game when he got taken out just after like 2 or 3 plays. And, you know, of course, Cutter came out and said, hey, listen, he's got one more game to prove something. You know, you really got to look at just how dire his situation may actually be, or how on the bubble his situation may be. Because I put in, Ren, I don't remember if you did or not, but I had McNichols on the 53-man roster, kind of serving during the Doug Martin suspension. And then, you know, with a little caveat that something's going to happen with those guys once Martin comes back. But, you know, I don't know. It really is looking it's not looking great for McNichols right now. The media, Hard Knocks, definitely building this into a big story. What are your thoughts on his whole situation?
I think if Doug Martin wasn't suspended, there is no way he makes this team. Now, I still think they like him, and he's like the classic developmental player. He would be great for the practice squad.
Right.
Now, being a 6th-round pick, I don't know if he get plucked or not. It's sort of, I mean, Hard Knocks isn't helping him at all. So
right.
I guess if they're trying to, you know, put him on the practice squad and get him through waivers, they're helping themselves.
Right.
But I'm sort of in your boat. Because when I do, you know, when I break down a 53-man roster, I'm not the only person that I'm leaving off. There's 2 people that I'm leaving off that I think the Bucks would rather keep. One is Riley Bullough. You know, they like all his attitude and things. Like they might just keep him around. You know, they like just keep him around maybe just for the locker room. But he misses it. And then George Johnson. Besides that, you know, there's not really anybody here or there there's not anybody I leave off the 53-man that I get upset about. So when I did my first run, there was 50 guys, and I had 3 guys to put on. I ended up putting on Cameron Lynch over Riley Bullough. I ended up putting McNichols on because I only took 3 backs, the original run through. And then I put on Josh Robinson because he's like, you know, obviously for special teams, and he's a cornerback / safety, even though he's playing a lot more safety this year. So there's room on the roster for Jerry McNichols. You know, there's you know, that's still like 9 offensive linemen, 10 defensive linemen with Stevie T and Silver making it. So you know, when you break it down, I wouldn't be surprised if he's on the team, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's not on the team. So. You know, that's just where he falls. But once again, if Doug Martin wasn't suspended, there's no way. There's no way.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you just said there. If he doesn't make the team, it's not really a big surprise. If he does make the team, also not really a big surprise. That's an interesting place to be in for a. I
believe they call that player. The bubble.
And he's on top at the very precipice of that bubble. He's not on one way or another, you know, tilting on either side. So that, I think those were kind of some of what I said were the losers of the week. They're asking in the chat room, I want to bring this in, says, do the Bucks have any say as to what is in Hard Knocks? I'm wondering if they know he's not ready, so they're making him look bad to make sure that he doesn't get picked up by another team so that he can make the practice squad. Is that a conspiracy theory between the Buccaneers and Hard Knocks? for that. I do know that the Bucs do get final say in what gets aired and what doesn't. I don't know, Ren, what do you think? Do you lend any credence to the conspiracy theory of the Bucs trying to keep McNichols by making him look as bad as he is?
No. I just think he is looking bad. Now, like I said earlier, like I think that's why sort of Dirk Cutter preemptively sort of, called out Jerry McNichols to the press, because he knew that this episode was coming, and it was not good for him. Do I think they sat down? The problem is, it's run by NFL Films, and NFL Films has absolutely the Buccaneers have absolutely zero control of what NFL Films wants to put up there. So it would have to be, like they said, it would have to be sort of like the Bucs going to them and like, hey, we want to keep this guy, but we're not going to be able to because the numbers don't work out. Can you do us a solid and everything that he messes up, put it on the air? No, I don't think that happened. I sort of get it, but that's bordering on tampering. Like I would even find that that would be some type of penalty in the NFL bylaws. It's fun to think about, but no, I don't think there's no evil corporation trying to hide players and not hide players.
Well, speaking of the Bucs maybe having a say in what actually gets played or what doesn't get played, let's talk about the rookie show that we got to see on this week's deal. Certainly, they're making fun of some of the coaches, making fun of Chris Baker, Swaggy, which I gotta say I loved seeing for Swaggy. For as much as he dishes out, he can also take it. He takes it in stride, takes it as a good sport. But what did you think about the rookie show, specifically the fact that they cut out the line of Aguayo from their top 10 that we all knew was up there? They just didn't have it in this episode.
Yeah, and they also cut out the line where, the top 10 where the number one was about Baker. Like I think they made fun of Baker twice about how ugly he is, and they made another joke about him, actually practicing, but it felt like it was a different joke than the actual top 10 list. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I was excited about it. Honestly, the most fun that the most times I sort of like shook my head and was like, I'm like, what are they doing? Like sort of laughing a little bit, was the McDonald McCoy when they're going through their
they're like little ninjutsu.
Yeah, but those moves are drills. Those they were actually like getting the tackles and guards off them. Like those are ways to get the offensive lineman's hands off you and get by them. Right. But while they're doing it, yeah, they're pretending they're karate guys.
I thought that was real interesting. I did a year or two of Taekwondo, and my kid's doing it right now, and you learn a lot of like grappling techniques and handbrake techniques. When you watch these defensive guys do their swim moves and get around, it happens so fast and so quick that you don't really see exactly what's happening. But watching it here on Hard Knocks, where they slowed it down and were practicing it and running through it with each other, I'm sitting here watching it thinking, man, these are like normal, like self-defensive grappling techniques that they're using to get an offensive lineman's hands off of them. Which I thought that was just, I just personally found that very interesting, seeing it as slowed down as it was. But also I thought it was hilarious that they were doing the Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan sound effects to it too.
Yeah, that's a good point. If they weren't dressed in football pads, they weren't like 300 plus pounds men, you could actually, and you put them inside like a gymnasium on mats, you could argue, or you would think, that's what they were doing. Like they were, someone goes to grab you, and then these are the moves you do to get, take their arm off you and get by them. I never thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. I guess they have a lot to do with each other. But yeah, that's what I found the most interesting, or I guess I said the most entertaining. Was those two guys doing that? The rookie show, going back to that, it was funny. I thought Jameis was funny. His reaction about you know, they were actually going to put the 5 ugliest people up on the board. You know, you couldn't believe they're going to do that. And I'm sure there was a few things in there that they couldn't show us, even for HBO, that were up there that happened. So I was really excited for the sort of the rookie show, and it didn't. I'm not going to say it disappointed, but it wasn't.
They didn't feature it as much as you kind of thought they might. You know, like they did the opening thing with O.J. Howard mocking Jameis a little bit, and then we saw Riley Bullough with the thing in his shirt, and the rookies kind of pretending to be some of the different guys. You know, and that was kind of it with whatever video they made as well.
Yeah, that was that. They made fun of Baker 3 times on that. Right. That made the air because that one guy was dressed as Baker, and he's like, "Nah, man, I'm good. I'm not going in for my rep." You know, that was the 3rd time they did it. It was like, so it seems everyone's noticed. Swaggy Baker sure as hell doesn't like to practice. Mm-hmm. But if you want to go back to winners, talk about Jameis.
Yeah, let's talk about Jameis was the first winner that I had down from this week.
And I'm not even sure I really like that being aired, or Jameis. I like it being aired. I didn't really know if I want to see Jameis to see it, with Jason Light, you know, sort of gushing over him to, you know, to that Lightning front office personnel guy. Mm-hmm. But you know, he was like, I closed my doors, was jumping up for joy. He inspires me. He's the best leader I've ever been around. I mean, it's great for his image, but you know. And also, you sort of heard that one line that Cutter put in there is like, you've been too much of a smartass lately. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like you're sort of like you're you know, it felt like he was saying you're starting to get too full of yourself. Like, you know, you think, you know, your own stuff don't stink type of deal. Which I'm not saying that's what's going on, but you know, it's sort of hard to stay grounded when you constantly hear this, you know, enamoring and praise of yourself, especially by your bosses. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you can sort of lose touch with reality and what you got going on. So I thought Jameis looked great. I thought the relationship between like him and his girlfriend was really fun and solid. But I still, when it was airing, I'm watching Jason like gush about Jameis Winston. I'm like, I didn't want that to be out. I didn't want that to be aired.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, and I feel like Jameis is a grounded enough person, a humble enough person to be able to hear that and not let that go to his head, because it certainly is something he hears a lot around Tampa Bay. You know, the question comes to just about anybody who's new down here, like, hey, is Jameis really like that? You know, what's the best thing? Oh, it's Jameis. He's in here. Like he knows that he's attracting people. He knows that that's a thing. And if he can live in that reality and stay humble and stay who he is as a person and not let that get to his head, you know, it seems like he's got some good people around him, his dad and his little brother and even Coach Cutter. You know, I think Coach Cutter has no problem calling Jameis out and telling him when he's being an ass, you know. But you know, I remember before Hard Knocks started, we talked about this a little bit on the preview episode we did. I think Cutter actually said this at some point about like what you're looking forward to with Hard Knocks, and it's that the nation would finally get to see Jameis in the same light that we see Jameis. Right. And I feel like we've seen it in all of the episodes so far, but this episode we saw we had Light having that gushing session you were just talking about, but we watched him continue to lead other guys around him and be that kind of inspiring person. And then certainly again the story about Deshaun turning down money in other places to come play with Jameis. Right. I mean, that's just an amazing thing. So I feel like Jameis, I'm going to put him in the winner category for this week, because it certainly helped his stock, particularly with people I think outside of Tampa, you know, getting to know Jameis a little bit better. Although I'm a little disappointed when they were showing the video of Good Morning Football when they're talking about who would you rather take, Cam Newton or Jameis Winston. They only showed Nate Burleson, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Holding up Cam Newton. Obviously, you saw Pete Schrags over there holding up Jameis's, but they didn't allow him to talk about why he would have picked Jameis. So a little disappointed to not see that.
Well, yeah, because the story was how Jameis walked into the room, it basically was Marpet and Donovan, sitting there and, and like boo and hissing at the TV. And then Jameis just walks in and just puts the squash in. He's like, I look up to Cam, and besides, and, as he's walking out, and then he's like, besides, he's been to a Super Bowl. It was just sort of, that was the story. Of that shot was, just Jameis like walking in there instead of being like, not to keep harping on Bobo Wilson, but I doubt he would have reacted that way if it was like, if it was somebody picked him or picked somebody else over him on national TV.
Right.
So, Jameis has been painted in the best light possible. You could even argue almost, it's like when you first hear the stories about him, it's like there's no way all of this can be true. It's like there's got to be a time where he's sad or not trying to take all the weight of everybody on his shoulders and carry him across the finish line. There's got to be a time where he just is sort of,
or he just loses it on somebody, or I mean the closest we've seen him do that is when he went up to Cole Gardner and that other guy and went like, y'all having fun? I mean, Ryan just got hurt. I'm glad y'all. That's the closest we saw him to losing it on somebody, like, ever.
Right. But that was still leadership, though, So,
Cole Gardner.
Cole Gardner. I forgive him now. He looks so sad, all scrunched up in the van. Slam the door in his face.
I was watching on one of the HBO, like, 4, or, one of those other ones they were playing last week's episode, and I was watching him walk out with Mo Fleming, and, he looked really sad.
He looked really sad.
So Jameis, we got Jameis as a winner. A couple other guys I think that are real obvious, but I'll let you pick which one you want to talk about next. Winner for the episode, who do you think?
Well, we already talked about Godwin a little bit.
Yeah, let's talk about because I want to go back to Godwin a little bit. In particular, the scene where he's working out with his girlfriend. One thing, let me just say, dating the coach's daughter.
That's ballsy.
He's got balls as big as coconuts, my friend. Like, that is something else. And she's like, yeah, he's real shy. I'm like, no, honey, he's not shy. That's just being an introvert. There's a difference. But that also means he's a good observer, which is probably why he's as intelligent into things as much as he is. That's just a part of that personality makeup usually. But I mean, out of the gate, they're talking about Godwin, bringing him in. You said it on the Instant Cast show, I think it was. Maybe I don't know. That this was some of the film that they had actually originally had planned for episode 2. But that got cut because of the whole Roberto Aguayo thing. Now getting to see it come back, but I mean, watching him work out and getting pushed by his girl. What'd you think about that?
I could be wrong, but it always looked like she did one more rep than he did.
I
just thought that was
and she had better form with it too. Like she
had way better form. Yeah. She had way better form. But it looks like I wonder what she does. Like, her form was so good, it looked like that's sort of like what she does for a living. Like she might be a fitness model or, sort of
a personal trainer or something.
Or something that has to do with being in the gym, for your, as your job. But no, I like them two together as well. They make a good couple. Like you said, he's definitely the introvert. When he speaks, he's smart. And it's not like he's shy. But she's definitely she'll take the lead in the conversation. That's for sure. And also, I really liked Cameron Litch and his girlfriend too. I thought they were really cute together.
I liked that they had both of the girls mic'd up in the stands for the game.
Yeah,
like just on a production level, I thought that was kind of. That was neat to see that as they completing that storyline. But so that's Chris Godwin and his girlfriend. But Chris Godwin on the field, if this episode kind of made you hate Bobo Wilson, I think this episode also made you really, really, really love Chris Godwin and what he can do and what he's been doing on the field.
Yeah. He's just going to be, this may be a little too much because he just retired and did have such a good year, but he reminds me of Anquan Bolden. Like, he doesn't say a lot. He's just going to go out there and do his job. Mm-hmm. And, he's not going to flash, and he's not going to talk about himself in the interview, and he's never going to have a problem off the field. Mm-hmm. He's just one of the, sort of like a Marvin Harrison, just quiet guy. And then his career is going to be over, and you're going to look up, and you're going to be like, what? Like, how did this guy only make 3 Pro Bowls? Mm-hmm. He'll be like top 15 in a lot of categories, and that's just kind of the way I see Chris Godwin. It's just I think he was a great third round pick, but I'm just really glad he's here. And also, as we look forward, it's sort of the thing we like to do on all our shows is I think the receiving core is in great hands. Once Deshaun Jackson moves on or retires. Mm-hmm. Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. I just here's another guy Jason Light has to sign in 3 years. Mm-hmm. It's and it's extremely early, but I just don't see him jumping off the rails like the way his personality is. I don't think his home life's going to jump off the rails, and just the way he approaches the game as a rookie. He already approached, like I've said a few times, like a 5-year pro. So I think he's going to be here a long time.
Yeah, I agree. He seems like he's playing so good to me that it's hard for me to call him our 4th wide receiver.
Right.
I know that's where he is technically on a depth chart. I mean, if you want to say he really is probably the 3rd wide receiver and Adam Humphries is our 1st slot receiver, because those are kind of different positions. That to me just kind of feels better. He feels like he's way better than where he is on the depth chart. But so remind me, Deshaun Jackson's contract was a 2-year contract, 3-year contract?
2 years, I believe.
2 year, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens with his contract as that comes up. But, fast forward a couple years for a guy like Chris Godwin, how good is he going to be playing come his 3rd year?
3 years, they can get out of it after 2.
There you go. Okay, so how good is Chris Godwin going to be playing in his 4th year when it's a contract year for him? And he's stepping in to take that role. I don't know. Does Chris Godwin, does he seem to have the speed? I know nobody has Deshaun Jackson's speed, but does Chris Godwin does he have the speed?
I think he ran like a faster 40. He's like one of those guys where, I mean, he's so it's like you just like if you scan a crowd, you would pass him. Like he may be a great Where's Waldo. It's just somebody you don't notice. But you've heard those stories where, wow, he's a lot bigger than I thought he'd be. And everybody says that. And so when you stand next to him, wow, you're a lot bigger than I think you'd be. And it's the same thing with his speed. I could look it up real quick, but I do remember him running I think it was faster than Mike Evans, which Mike Evans ran like a 4.5 flat, I believe, and a 4.51. So he was real close to that, but I think he was a little bit faster. But he gets open in practice, and that's how you know if you're fast enough for the NFL. Luke
4.42 is what he
ran. There you go, 4.42, almost a whole tenth faster.
Yeah,
exactly. It's like 4.42. What? It's the same thing. It's like you stand next to him. It's like there ain't no way you're 6'1", bro. There ain't no way. So yeah, a 4.42. Yeah, he's just gonna be one of those guys.
Deshaun Jackson is 4.35, by the way, just so we know. So that's still another tenth faster that he'd need to get to catch up to that. Which, a tenth of a second matters. It matters in this league. So
yeah, it's a whole 2-3 body length. It's like a good 3 yards in a 40-yard dash. A tenth of a second is 3.5 yards, and that's a lot.
That's crazy.
That's how fast they're moving.
Yeah. Good thing we get to watch it on TV. A little slow mo. So Chris Godwin moving. Hey, talking about Where's Waldo? I got to play a little game of Where's Waldo at Raymond James Stadium, looking for our good friend Derek Old Score Fournier from What the Buck over across the stands. And kind of took my phone and I zoomed in as far as it would let me, and just kind of looking for him. I was reminded of that again tonight when when they were showing the footage of the game. And with the rain coming down as hard as it was, Penny and I were huddled up together under two of those big red Buccaneer ponchos that they showed. I think it was Lynch's girlfriend trying to get. But we were in like an area where we were the only ones sitting. So there was at least twice when I looked up and I could see my wife and I. Very, very blurry, but it was definitely us in the background, just this big smudgy red dot up in the gray seats. So very fun to play Where's Waldo, not just with Derek, but also with myself.
You have been on Hard Knocks twice.
I have. I'm an HBO star. I will be signing autographs, $20 a piece, right after I finish fighting Mark Cook.
Yeah, that's right. What are you fighting Mark Cook for?
I'm because they gave us a 4-star review on iTunes.
Cook's shenanigans.
Son of a.
You're gonna have to get your SAG card here pretty soon.
I might, yeah. I think you're only allowed like one non-union deal before you got to get into that. So, don't ask me how I know. So, anyway, we've got Jameis as a winner this week. We got Godwin as a winner this week. You had anybody else? I had two more guys personally, but. Just wondering who you had maybe as kind of winners coming out of the episode this week.
Let me go back and think. I started taking notes, but then Cheryl sat down with me and we started talking a little bit while I was talking about Buccaneer stuff. So sure. I kind of quit taking notes. Let's see, who else was a winner?
I'll give you one. I thought Dante Dye. I thought I thought they put him in about as best the light as they could. I don't know that it means that he makes the team any more than he would have before. Right. But it's.
But they did keep him around for 2 weeks instead of putting him on release injured.
Yeah. Yep.
And he did have about the best game. 2 of those catches were really good catches.
Mm-hmm. And they showed that they showed that touchdown pass that wasn't a touchdown pass, or that incompletion that was actually a touchdown pass. Like however you want to look at it. It really, really should have been, but that's neither here nor there. And Dante Dye is a guy that one reason or another keeps getting released by the team, but they keep bringing him back, and he seems to find his way off the practice squad sooner or later and onto the active roster as well.
Yeah,
and get some playing time.
And that's probably the biggest thing working for him in his favor is that he has been around, for the past 2 years, like you said, bouncing up and down. So obviously they like him because they keep bringing him back. He got injured, like bone on bone bruise. I don't know why he wasn't practicing with a bone bruise, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know how severe it was, but like I said, they didn't release injure him, so they wanted him around, and then he didn't get in too early in the game, but he did get in when Jameis was still throwing. But I believe that was the third quarter. After halftime, but he caught everything they threw to him, and everyone thinks it was a touchdown. I always kept looking because it looked like he might have dropped the ball or fell on the ball, like the ball was moving when he hit the ground. But as far as so that's what I always sort of look for, and I can't tell. Yeah, and if I could tell, I don't think the referee could tell. And because I've seen it from like 9 different angles now. Right.
I got to tell you, I was pretty close to the big screens they have in the stadium when they showed it, and they were backing up frame by frame, and it was pretty clear to everybody in the stadium. He had full control of that ball. He had 2 feet down. But of course, the ref is over there looking at the little Microsoft Surface tablet. A much smaller screen than what was very clear in full color HD, on a screen bigger than the size of a barn. So The only thing that I could come down to that particular thing was it was ruled an incompletion, and there wasn't enough overwhelming evidence to overturn the call on the field. Had it been ruled a touchdown, I don't know that there would have been enough overwhelming evidence to call it back from not being a touchdown. Had the challenge gone the other way. So I think ultimately that's kind of what that came down to. Our friend Dan over in the chat room says that Dye was a winner except for when he was talking.
He does have a high voice.
And what did he say? Cicadas. They were talking about that a little bit earlier in the chat room about how does he not know that cicadas attack Florida every year, which is true. I'm looking at a couple cicadas outside my window right now. I believe they are. So let's see here. So Dante Dye, I had Dante Dye as a winner. I thought he came out. I think he came out looking better for his time on Hard Knocks this week than he did certainly going in. I got to tell you this: it was a little bit hard watching the pregame speech of this last game against the Browns. Watching Jameis talk about defending the house and keeping the W in your pocket and all that, knowing what the outcome of the game was going to be.
Right.
That was a little harder to watch. Speaking of that whole deal, and going back to Jameis for just a minute, what did you make of Jameis talking to Kaiser, the Browns quarterback, who has just been named their starting quarterback, getting to talk to him? I guess it was after the game, kind of coaching him through it a little bit. What did you make of that?
I think that goes on all the time. I think everyone did it to Jameis, and I think Deshaun Kaiser's going to get that almost after every game, especially every loss. Mm-hmm. When he goes up to the opposing quarterback, they're going to put in a little bit of advice, give him a little advice.
Do they? Because what I normally see is it's usually just the handshake, the hug, and they have like one or two sentences for each other while they're being clamored with video cameras around them. And then they turn and walk away. That's usually what I see coming after a game.
Yeah, but that's like Brady Rodgers. I mean, what are those guys going to say to each other? That's like Drew Brees, Matt Ryan. Mm-hmm. Drew Brees isn't going to hang out and talk to Jameis, but with a young rookie, and is the camera really going to follow Jay Cutler, Deshaun Kaiser? Are there going to be 30 cameras around those guys when they meet at midfield to give talk a little bit? The answer is no. Mm-hmm. So that's the sort I think. I think I've seen it plenty of times, where guys talk, and then, of course they start. That's where they sort of get each other's numbers and things. They could text back and forth if they want to. They also play, talk and play a lot, through Madden, through PlayStation and Xbox. Like,
do they really?
Yeah, I don't want to say it's a new thing, but it's a new thing to me that I've sort of been hearing a couple of times this off season. That's sort of like the tampering, non-tampering way players sort of communicate is by hey, I need to talk to you. Oh, really? Okay. How about we hook up and play Madden? And then as they're playing Madden, they might so what do you feel about playing for Tampa next year? Sure, like to have you. It's crap like that. Where I don't like I say I don't know if it goes on. I just have this feeling that that's where a lot of the guys do their talking sort of.
It's the new golf course.
Yes, thank you, Thank you. The perfect analogy. Thank you for saving me there. Yes, it's the golf course of the professional football player.
Very fun. I would. I'm not sure, honestly. I'm not much of a gamer, so I'm not sure that I would be much better doing that in Madden than I would actually being out on the golf course. At least on the golf course, you get a little bit tan. Going back, I had one more winner coming out of this week. Did you have anybody that popped up in your mind?
No, since I couldn't think of one last time, I definitely don't have one this time either.
Yeah, I feel like you might have mentioned him on the other side, but I felt like Cameron Lynch had a pretty good showing in this episode as well. that we came out, and you and I both had Cameron Lynch making the 53-man roster in episode 43, which is now available for anybody to go listen to. Episode 43, The End is Near. Very fun episode where we kind of closed out preseason and updated our 53-man roster ahead of the cut down on Saturday. But yeah, you and I both had Lynch making it. Kind of good to see him because I think Cameron Lynch is a guy, if I remember right, Greg Allman was talking about him last year quite a bit of how he was a guy who would continually get cut, but then would wind up on a practice squad, and he'd kind of bounce around from team to team a little bit.
He's from the CFL.
Is he?
Yeah.
Cool. Maybe he got developed. Awesome. But I think he certainly, and maybe whatever developed with him in the CFL, and on these practice squad, it kind of looks like this might be his year to do something, though. He's still certainly going to be, low man on the depth chart. Like, he could be one of those guys that makes the initial 53, but maybe if we find another person that gets cut from another team, like, he might be a casualty there.
As soon as Bond comes back.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yes. So, I certainly wish him all the best. He certainly looks like he's doing really well, from certainly what we've seen personally in camp and in the game, and then again what we watched on Hard Knocks.
And he's playing a lot of special teams.
That he is. That he is.
A great sign.
It's you got to make yourself versatile, and I mean, Cutter says that all the time. Like, unless you're one of the starters, you have to play special teams in order to stay on this team.
Yeah, he doesn't even say like it's a good idea to. He's just like, you have to.
Right.
He says it all the time, and there's like, he says it as in there's no other way about it. Like there's no like, well, maybe if you're good enough. He's like, no, the way he says it, it's like, if you don't start, you play special teams, period, end of story.
Yeah, and I mean, to even go back to that, when we were watching in the boardroom when they were kind of doing out grades, I think it came to a spot where they were talking about McNichols, and there was the running back coach who gave McNichols his grade there, which I think was like a D-, and then it flipped over to the special teams coordinator who was giving his grade from a special team standpoint, and he had a C-. So right. Not a ton of improvement, though certainly a little bit better, but we were seeing him kind of on both of those sides. So those were my winners for this week: Jameis, Godwin, Lynch, and Dye. And then the losers I had coming out of this episode were Bobo Wilson, Riley Bulla, and Jeremy McNichols. So that's about all I had on this episode. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, not really. I mean, I think, we didn't get any calls tonight, and I think sort of Buck Phantom, and I've noticed that, sort of like Buccaneers Twitter has sort of been dead, like after the Browns game. Uh-huh. It was just such a, the weather dumped us, and there was, there was a stick carrier thing, and that didn't really work out. Mm-hmm. And then, the team sort of looked blah. I think that was actually a quote from Dirk Cutter, like blah. So everyone sort of felt a little bit let down, and so we talked a little bit, like I said on the main episode. Everyone's just really ready for football now. Like that third preseason game, it didn't really help the hype. It didn't keep the hype train going, and now it's like just give me the Dolphins. Like mm-hmm. I don't like who cares who makes the team. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about it. I've heard about it. It's sort of like that draft fatigue. Yeah. You know how much you hate the draft? Yeah.
The mock drafts and the leading up to it's like, oh my God, Can we just get this and be done and move on? Yeah.
I sort of feel like, at least as far as the Buccaneer fans are going, like, and I'm right there with it. It's just like preseason fatigue is over. Like, right. I'm over it. I'm ready for September 10th. Yeah.
I think we are all definitely right there together. We are all in that same boat, ready to go. We do, however, have one more preseason game to go. That's coming up this Thursday against the Washington Redskins. I'm going to be there at the game. I'm going to take my 5-year-old son to this game, and he's been asking me to go to a game. He's not a kid who has a terribly long attention span. So I'm interested to see how it's going. This is the only game I'm going to take him to because, honestly, if we wind up having to leave after the first quarter, it's not going to make me cry.
Gotcha. Smart move.
Smart move. But he wants to, I want him to see the pirate ship, and I want him to check out the stadium and kind of have that, my dad took me to my first NFL game experience. So when I was 5, and we got him a little Gerald McCoy jersey, so he'll be wearing that. And so with that, we have that. I want to let everybody know that the Instant Cast will be back this week. We will be talking about that 4th game. However, the Instant Cast will be in its normal time slot, which means it'll be Sunday night at 9 o'clock. There is no Game of Thrones this week, so we will not be competing with that. Although I do have to say, in spite of despite, I guess, the Game of Thrones finale, we had one of our best Instant Cast shows coming off of this Browns game last week.
Right? I mean, didn't that show break all kinds of records?
It did, and we started the show saying nobody's calling in, and we had the most callers for any show that we've ever had in this format. So, and we had more people in the chat room. I don't know that it got quite to the top of the list yet, but it's in the top 5 as far as people we had joining us live. It's doing well on downloads, so great show. So if you guys haven't checked out the Instant Cast for the Browns game, I'd highly recommend it. Lots of fun things we talked about there. Be sure to check out episode 43. We've mentioned that a few times. Both of those now available in the podcast feed. Be on the lookout for Instant Cast show coming back. You can find us in the chat room at mixler.com/thepetercast. That'll be Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time in the evening, 2100 hours for you military folks out there. And then really after that, we've got one more episode of Talking Knocks. That'll be next week and Tuesday. Same deal here, immediately following the final episode of HardKnocks. So hopefully we'll see all of you guys in the chat room. And being the final show, hopefully we'll get a few more of you guys calling in for that show. And then after that, it's on to the Bears. And the regular season is here. We'll go into our normal format of Instant Cast and then main episode each week. So it's been a fun time here during the preseason. But Ren, as you say, the fatigue is definitely set in. I'm ready for the season.
Yep. Let's get it on.
Let's do it. All right, we'll go ahead and close out this show. Ren, why don't you tell everybody out there where they can find you out on the internet?
Find me on Twitter's the easiest way, because Facebook is dead, at Rendax, REN_DAXT.
And you can find me on the dead Facebook at facebook.com/Brent Allen Live. I am also on Twitter, actually a bit more active there, at Brent Allen Live. Yeah. I'm also on Instagram. You guys follow me on Instagram. I'm out there as well. I don't actually remember what my handle is. Probably Brent Allen. Maybe. I'm out there. You'll see me. You know what I look like.
Scan all the billions of users on Instagram for my face.
There's not that many Brents out there. So, but you guys can do that. We've got some fun changes coming to the podcast here very, very soon, so you guys be on the lookout for that. Oh, one more thing. Final call. This is going to be it right here. Final call for anyone who would like to join the PewterCast second annual Fantasy Football League. Send me an email to thepewtercast@gmail.com. Put fantasy football in the line. We've got just a couple more spots available for that. We will be having the draft coming up here after the 53-man cut down, so you guys make sure you want to jump into that. It is a $10 entry fee. We will be splitting the pot. Half will go to the winner. The other half will go to a named charity. We'll probably team up with the What the Buck Really Matters crew to just kind of, they're already doing really good stuff, so we might team up with whatever they're doing over there, which is what we did last year. So all of that's there. If you guys want to be in that, grab the last couple of spots. You guys can do that, and we'll get that going. So other than that, follow the show at the PewterCast on Twitter or on Facebook.com/thePewterCast. Send all emails to thepewtercast@gmail.com. And with that, guys, until next time, go Bucks.